Welcome, everybody, to this episode of A.H.A, aka Addicts Helping Addicts, brought to you by New Beginnings. We are a recovery based podcast where we talk about addiction and hopefully eliminate some of the stigma around it. And so we are able to open up a dialogue and actually confront these problems. On today's episode, we have Katt. She works as a recovery specialist and advocate. Welcome, Katt.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on.
So we have Katt, who is a recovery specialist and advocate. She's been working in treatment, I'd say maybe a good 3 to 5 years.
That was so generous of you. I've been working in treatment for 1 year. I've been in recovery for 5.
Okay, all right. And so we want her to give her perspective. I've had a chance to work with her, and she speaks so lovely. Just the things that she says, I feel are very profound. So me and Kyle wanted her to have an opportunity to speak, just about recovery, the experience, and then, speak on some things that are important to her. So yes, thank you so much, Katt, for coming on with us. Very appreciated. Very much.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I really am.
Yeah.
Just gonna ask her a couple questions to get her acquainted with our viewers and such. So, how old were you when you first started using?
So my mom would say my first addictive behavior started with my relationship with food. I would hide junk food in my room. I couldn't eat any sort of sugar or junk food like a normal kid. I had to eat all the candy out of the ice cream or lick the flavor off the chips, and I would put them back in the bag. My mom was tortured by me and my weird behaviors. I used to hide peanut butter and powdered sugar in my room so I could eat it in the middle of the night when we didn't have the right kind of junk food in the house. It was pretty out of hand, but I would say I was around 14 when I really started figuring out about substances and working on becoming an addict.
What brought you to the doorstep of addiction?
So there were a couple factors involved. I was raised or spent a lot of my childhood in a very small town during the early 2000s and the 90s. I was a 90s baby. And so the opioid dumping had started. So my friends at a very young age started bringing pharmaceuticals to school. We stopped playing with toys and pharmaceuticals started showing up, kind of like a magic trick. And I wasn't very brave in the beginning, but drinking did seem easier. And I guess I could say I was from a turbulent past. Some fucked up things happened as a kid, but I would say it was definitely a combination because I have a very distinct time in my brain when I remember realizing that I was just kind of an unhappy kid. And it would probably be around my early teens where I just felt really disconnected. And I had a lot of trouble as a kid in general. I was bad at school. I was pretty pissed off and high strung. I took the world very personally. And I had lost my parent. My mom was an addict. So things were pretty wild. But drinking was always my first one. And my friends had brought pharmaceuticals, but I wasn't quite that brave. So I started experimenting with alcohol, different kinds of drinking. And I didn't always like the taste, but I really loved the feel. There was a very specific, almost a vibration that went through me when I drank. It was a wonderful feeling. And no matter how bad the next day was, I couldn't wait to do it again.
Absolutely.
So Katt, so when you were drinking and you found that was like helping you to kind of like, I guess, cope, like I guess I just want to talk to this point. At what point did you find that then even when you tried to stop, like you had to go back, like the part where you did want to stop but you may have started to feel sick and you're like, now I need it, like it became more of coping and that part right there for people to understand, like that part, where it's hard to kind of stop because now you're coping and now you're trying to keep from being sick from stopping?
So actually, thank you for asking me that, because I think this is a really under talked about thing. There was no like tap on the shoulder or hint that I was suddenly physically addicted. There was a long time where I didn't want to try to stop because I was in a lot of pain in my mind, in my heart, in the meetings, they call it a spiritual sickness as well as an allergy in the brain. And I believe that's very much true. I had developed a pretty deep disdain for myself and my life. And so I didn't even consider wanting to stop. I was just trying to figure out ways to get people to leave me alone about it for the better part of a decade. And then I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, I would try to quit drinking for a day because I had a kid and I had a partner by then who was not an addict. So I kind of started trying to slow down or stop or negotiate with my addiction, and I would get sick. I would get long-term violently sick. I fainted a couple times. I figured out I was having what I later found out were seizures, the beginning of seizures. It was very scary, and you don't know what happened or when it happened, so you kind of don't tell anyone, and you just keep trying to manage it. But yeah, I didn't try to stop it for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
There was no checking in with myself.
Yeah.
Do you believe that addiction is a disease? Or does it turn into a disease? Do you think we're born with it? Or do you think it's something that we just kind of find along the way?
So I'm going to preface this with, this is my personal opinion and I'm not a doctor, but I do believe there are 2 types of addicts. I believe there are those who are unfortunate enough to where they were introduced to pharmaceuticals or a highly addictive substance and otherwise had a pretty okay life, but had to later come off that because, again, no one checks in with you and tells you, hey, you're going to start getting sick if you keep doing this for a couple months.
Yeah.
And I believe that in itself is very scary and traumatizing, and there's a lot of shame making it harder to quit. And then I believe there are those of us, because there were many friends of mine who drank, but they didn't drink like me. I took in anything that gave me dopamine in a very different way. And that's where I believe I like the description of allergy because I think it's the easiest way to describe what kind of happens in the brain. So I know a lot of people describe it to cancer. I have very strange feelings about that now, but I really appreciate the allergy concept because it is very much like, I say it in groups sometimes, being at a birthday party and you're allergic to strawberries and everything is strawberry themed.
Expand on that, because I think the allergy might be a term for people who have never heard of that. And to be honest, I actually have not heard of that. So I guess for people out there who might be like, what's the allergy? What is the allergy term? So can you just, in your own words, explain what that may mean?
Yeah, I will do my best. So in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, there is a chapter called The Doctor's Opinion. And actually our host may have read it or will read it soon in Adventuring Through Recovery and Meetings. And this doctor was a friend of our founder, Dr. Bob. And what he found, the closest he found to explain it medically speaking, was there is a reaction in the brain that triggers obsession when your dopamine gland is tickled. So normal people have the like, that felt nice. Now I'm grateful, moving on with life. And they have no doubt or need to chase that dopamine because they know they'll get it again. People who are prone to addiction and addicts, alcoholics, particularly is where this is coming from, Alcoholics Anonymous, and their chapter on it says that addicts have a trigger in their brain when they use substances that dopamine dump, where an obsession is unleashed and our thinking gets very small and tunnel vision, and we start to chase that dopamine feeling. We'll eat until we're sick. We'll do unhealthy things for extended periods, and like I said earlier, not check in with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe someone with a healthier thought process would.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that take on it. It puts it in a different light, you know. Makes you stop and really think about, why am I an addict? Is it something wrong with me? Is there something, I like that.
And
Um,
I feel it takes away the fault where it's not, you didn't do anything wrong and maybe no one did anything horrific to you. Sometimes we just have brains and they do funny things.
Yeah, exactly. It's just how we were built, you know. Not, our viewers don't know this, but Kareem and I do. You lost your husband to COVID. Were you
I
using
did.
at that time? And if you weren't, what kept you sober? What kept you? I mean, that's a hard situation to go through. If you're sober. So if you were sober, how'd you make it through without relapse?
That's a loaded question. So many things happened during his diagnosis. I was 4 years recovered when he was diagnosed with cancer. And then in being diagnosed with cancer and the chemo treatments, he ended up being exposed to COVID and passed away.
Sorry to hear
But
that.
thank you. I appreciate the sympathy. I do. He was a wonderful man and helped me through my recovery. It's not easy to meet someone in active addiction and then follow them through that kind of change. So we credit him for that for sure. But while this very heavy, difficult thing was happening in my life that I would have absolutely used and drank at 4 years ago, there were also these wild gifts happening in my life. I went from working a soul crushing third shift job to being able to be a recovery advocate and specialist. And not only that, the place I was working listened to my voice. And I felt like my skills that didn't really matter before mattered a lot, like stepping with empathy first and being able to meet people where they're at and come at people with non-judgment and be able to hear these really dark stories that people keep very close to them and tell them it's okay, I've done these things too, and you're safe here to share that. And that's um it was wildly validating. And we lose that in our addiction. We don't
Hmm.
spend a whole lot of time liking ourselves. And another thing was happening where I was showing up for my husband. Doctors were listening to me when I said things to them. And I started to understand that I was no longer the, like, oh, that's just the drunk crazy girl, don't worry about what she said. My voice mattered again. um, so there was this kind of collision of gifts and lessons happening, and I knew, some part of me had known, I was far enough into my recovery, I understood that if I used at the pain instead of feeling it in real time and running to my meetings and my sponsors when I needed to and telling people, I can't pretend to feel good today, I am hurting, that there would be, if I used that, it all that went away. It all went away. I have a world now where people give me help, or if I say I can't pay my phone bill, my mom just gives me the money. She doesn't pay it for me. She doesn't ask where my money's going.
Yeah.
These are things that that 5 years ago, I would have never expected to happen. I would have just fused at it and crumbled.
I can really speak to what you just said when you said where you became part of something again, where you weren't just the crazy drunk girl in the room. I refer to it as being seen again. Like when you walk into a store and you're an addict or you're a junkie and your life's a mess and you don't make eye contact with people and you stay to yourself and you feel like people are looking through you. They ignore you like you're not even there. And I remember coming out of rehab and walking back into that store, proud with my head held high, looking at people, and I feel like I was being seen again, like I was a real person again. So I definitely appreciate you bringing that up for sure. Thank you so much.
um, Pat, you basically spoke to your experiences. Basically, you just had a system that just came into place for you, where and then you had a voice, and everybody was basically acknowledge you, and people were basically there for you. Was that probably a good characterization of what you said?
Yeah, I would say that was, yes, those were the gifts.
So, do you think that that experience is what's missing overall for other addicts when they're struggling, and they may not have anyone who sees them or listens to them. Do you think that that's a big issue right now?
I think that's definitely one of the things that you, just like you look up one day and suddenly you're physically addicted to these things that were seemingly helping you. You look up one day and no one's listening to you anymore. Very much like our host said, like you stay very small and people don't see you until like money goes missing or something that goes wrong. Then suddenly everybody sees you.
Yeah.
And it becomes terrifying, right? And it's kind of a shitty way to live. And for me, I can't speak to everyone, but I will say for me, a big catalyst was feeling unseen, unheard, and out of control in my life. A lot of very adult things happened in my life at a very young age where I felt I was horribly out of control. And this seemed to give me this, every time I used, I had that false sense of like total control. I was particularly a drinker and a stimulant user. And with that comes this very false sense of security in your environment around you. So yeah, that's where I would land on.
Yeah, the drugs have a way of making you feel like you're in control and your life's together until you actually step back and realize, oh shit, my life's falling apart.
In shambles, yeah.
I want to touch back on what you said about small towns because I think that's what's really going on in our little communities right now is there's nothing to do. People are broke, they're out of work and there's nothing to do, so why not get high? I know in our little small towns, that's what's going on now. People don't have cars, there's nothing to do, so they sit home and they get high. And it was fun to do at first, but now they're in this cycle where they can't break out of it. And a lot of people have been reaching out, and saying this. So they want to break out, they don't know how, they're just stuck in this cycle. And breaking the cycle is very, very challenging. Getting out of your old routines and changing your people's places and things. We talked about that in treatment. So for sure. What's your view on harm reduction? I know a lot of people are against it. They say a drug is a drug is a drug, So what? You quit heroin, now you're on Suboxone. It's the same thing. It's the government's heroin, But for me, I think not going out for that chase every day, not having to worry about spending my money to feel well and being able to function. I'm for it.
Harm reduction. Here, I think people who are not addicts and don't work with addicts like Kareem, forget that when we say things like harm reduction or safe shooter sites, we don't always mean harm reduction for the addict. We mean harm reduction for you, to have less, as a citizen, to have less addicts sick and desperate and scared, and not having facilities to go to and not having support systems to turn to and not having tapering programs, as some people have used far more substances than others, and maintenance programs are very important for them to be able to kind of integrate back into their present mind and present body, and your body hates you and your thinking is horribly warped, and that psychological trigger, that obsession to kind of ease that off for a while, is not just harm reduction for the person and risk of relapse. I personally was on Wellbutrin for the first year, maybe year and a half of my recovery. It's also for the community. And I feel they forget that because it's almost like they view the two things separately. Like, well, it's not good enough that you're on a maintenance program unless you're totally sober like me. I don't view it as progress. And it's like, my dude, they're not breaking into your house. What do you want?
Yeah. I had a couple of family members when I told them I'm on Suboxone. They're like, oh, really? I thought you were sober. I'm like, I am sober. I'm not on drug. I guess I just classify it differently. You know what I mean? It's not. What's in it. You know where it's coming from. You don't have to chase it. Like you said, you're not scared, isolated, and alone because addiction wants you alone. Addiction wants you isolated. It wants you cut off, unseen. So being able to be on a maintenance program and be able to get your thinking right, like you said, and be able to be seen again and be a part of society, it is harm reduction for everyone around the addict too, like you said, for sure. And they're not breaking into your house, like you said.
Yeah, like
stealing your,
what do you,
stealing
let's
your copper off your telephone pole.
exactly, like let's ease up on these really strict expectations. And I think if we can remove the obsession trigger. My phone's just died. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, actually better.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I wish we knew that
So
in
if we, I know, if we remove the obsession for the addict, then they can start to heal mentally and physically and spiritually. And maybe someday they will want to get off maintenance too. It's really up to them. Recovery. That's why I use I am an addict in recovery, because how I recover, as long as for me, I'm using the 12 steps. I have a sponsor that is someone who has more recovery time than me to guide me when I am in crisis. Then, and I have a stable life now, then that qualifies. And please stop taking my inventory. I do my own step 10 daily.
Absolutely. What's your view on harm reduction, Kareem? Being in the medical standpoint, do you feel like it's
Yeah.
beneficial, or do you feel like some others feel like my family members?
Okay. So I I want to say this before I forget. Because I feel like there's different schools of thought. But I wanted to speak to the part where you guys were discussing about how people feel like that you're not sober if you're using Suboxone or Subutex or any of those things to stay stable. Um, and I think it comes from those really old school people who just that have been in recovery for a while, and they're just like hard line. Like I think even not even taking that, they just feel like if you take any, not almost any type of, but I almost feel like that because I used to go to these conferences and oh my God, like anything that you would use that was to the benefit of recovery was considered a relapse. And I'm like, oh my God, so like they're just supposed to do this like without anything? Like, I mean, I do realize that there are certain people who just have that habit and they're just like, no, that's it. I'm not gonna, and they go through and then they suffer. They feel like that suffering is going to really get them through, and that is totally fine. But I'm like, if that was everybody, we probably wouldn't be having these conferences. We wouldn't be having the issues we'd be having if everybody had the same willpower or whatever that you did. So just like you said, Kat, and this is the way I explain it. Suboxone, Subutex, and all those Vivitrol, all these different things, they're meant to allow you to focus on the recovery so that you're not dealing with your cravings. You're not dealing with any triggers or anything like that. So you can actually do the work. So you can actually be aware of what could cause a trigger, so you be aware of whatever the situation might be that could bring you back. If you're constantly thinking about, I want to use, I'm just like, I need it. I mean, then you're not going to focus. I mean, just think about if you're in pain and someone's trying to talk to you, be like, I can't focus. I'm in pain. Let's get me out of the pain first. You can ask me anything you want. But as long as I'm feeling like shit, as long as I'm hurt, don't talk to me because I'm going to yell at you, So I think that's going to be a constant battle, unfortunately, where some people just are just like, well, you're not drug free if you're not drug free until you stop taking everything. I'm just like, well, you're just dooming that person. Okay.
Yeah, and that judgment hurts too. Being a addict in recovery, I was so proud. I had my head held high, and I came out, and I'm like, I'm sober, and then to have someone say, "Yeah, you're not." I was like, "Excuse me? Do you know what I've been through? Do you know what I used to do to get drugs? Do you know how much money I spent on drugs? Do you know how many times over I destroyed my life? And now I'm able to focus. I'm able to focus on my future, my daughter, my wife, paying bills and just being a member of society again. So it hurts. It really takes you down a notch when someone says, no, you're not sober because you're on harm reduction medication. And while we're
Yeah.
on the subject, how do you guys feel? What is your classification, Kat, on marijuana? A lot of people don't classify, they say you're not sober if you smoke weed. But marijuana is medicinal. I think it helps a lot of people with their pain, anxiety. And it's a better alternative. It's a natural alternative, to Wellbutrin or along those lines. That's my statement.
Um,
That's a high risk question, isn't it?
well, we still go back. Okay. So we're going to go back to yet another school of thought about gateway. So, there's again, there's the belief of if you use one, you're gonna, take a step up to the next one, into the next one, into the next one. So, the question was, what do I think we think about using marijuana, right? Do
Yeah.
we consider? So
You consider if you smoke marijuana, do you consider it being sober? If you're not on heroin, crack, all the anything else.
I mean, it has
I know it's a mind-altering drug, but it's natural.
well, I mean, let's go with Oxycontin. So it's oxycodone. I mean, they could, they affect your, there are a lot of drugs that affect. So it depends. If it's truly for medicinal treatment, but then you have to know yourself. I mean, I feel like that's more on an individual basis because
Yeah.
if for you, the individual, and we have to go back to what makes you feel, if something that makes you feel good. If you take something like that can give you a feeling that is similar to the things that you were using that could cause you to become an addict, then you might want to consider something else just because. And that's why I say it's individual. Everybody's not going to be the same. That's why I don't want to. I personally, there might be a disagreement, but I don't think that something like marijuana is going to always be a gateway. I mean, I took a few puffs. I didn't decide to,
Yeah.
So to me, it's just really on an individual basis and knowing yourself and understanding that I might go a little bit far with this. So maybe for me, especially if the advancements in medicine are vast. So if you needed it for health purposes, unless there was absolutely no alternative, then it would be something that's okay that you just monitor with. So that's my take on that.
I have a lot of directions where I agree with you. Sorry, I was writing because I didn't want to lose my thoughts as you were talking. So that is exactly like you said, bouncing off what I said earlier, like dopamine chasing is a very delicate situation for an addict. And that's why I like the concept of the allergy. Some people, like we were talking about harm reduction too, some people with allergies need a whole EpiPen situation. Some people get itchy, watery eyes, and it's a little bit of an inconvenience to them. There are levels of addiction for people. So in order to survive, some people need to be absolute zero tolerance for all. I know NA people who don't drink coffee anymore. Like they absolutely nothing.
Similar.
Um,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know other people who are on harm reduction maintenance. Or I was on, like I said earlier, I was on Wellbutrin for a lot of the beginning of my recovery as a mood stabilizer and harm reduction. So when it comes to marijuana use, I would say and I get this asked in my work a lot, and the thing I try to respond with most often is, are you asking so you can give yourself a pass to start using something again? And that's where marijuana becomes a gateway again. It will never be heroin. It'll never be meth. It'll never even be alcohol. It will never feel that good. You get some pretty strong stuff now that it's legal in some states now. And you can even get it for exactly what you want it for. So I think it's one of those things that, like Kareem was saying, I would suggest using very gentle, like medical harm. I liked Wellbutrin because I had generalized anxiety and a huge depression issue when I was first in recovery. So to use something that stabilized me out, it was easier to stay focused and be a little more gentle on myself. If someone wanted to use, say, marijuana as something, I would say in the beginning of your recovery, be very careful that you might click on that dopamine chaser thing.
It takes a lot of self-awareness. So go to meetings, learn about your addiction, learn about your triggers, learn about what sets you off and why. Every now and then, if you are a smoker, check in with yourself. What are you doing and why are you doing it? Just we as addicts forget to ask ourselves, what am I doing and why am I doing it?
Thank you. Okay. Both of those are very good takes, and I appreciate it because, like you said, you get this question asked a lot, and I have been too. Okay, I'm sober. Can I call myself sober? I do smoke weed, but I'm not, breaking into houses to chase my other dragons. So
Mhm.
I definitely appreciate both views, and I think opening up this dialogue, and because people are curious, people are wondering, and asking these sort of questions is going to help us move forward for sure.
Yeah, I think kind of, I want to say it this way because Katt said it, I want to say it this way. And we also have to make sure that, the person's not giving themselves permission to do something again, which is pretty much what she just said. Making sure that you're just not trying to find a way,
Giving
it's
an
like,
excuse to use.
well, like, okay, because let me just take something as simple as, like, okay, let's say I wanted to abstain from sugar. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, well, is it okay if maybe I have like a little sweet tea, just something a little sweet, you know? Am I giving myself permission to really step back into that sugar? Because I know that if I just have something a little bit sweet, I'm going to take it a step further and a step further. I'll go ahead and speak to me. Yeah, I did stay away from some sugar. And as soon as I had something small, it's over. So it's like, you have to make sure you're not trying to justify in some type of way, or have someone to help you justify trying to do something that you probably should stay away from, and you have to again know yourself. Like like your friend Kyle, she was saying, I cannot be around anybody who does this or that. I just know this is going to happen.
Yeah,
I can't
exactly.
be
She
around it.
knows she doesn't have the strength to hold
Yeah.
back.
So you have to be honest with yourself about where you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. I know that we as people, we don't want to appear like we don't have it together. And we have to be okay with being human and knowing sometimes it's a journey to really like strengthen those weaknesses. But it doesn't make you lesser of a person if you get around somebody and they're like having a glass of wine and you just like, oh, Jesus Christ. You have to know that maybe I need to probably step away because I'm starting to get a little itch for it. So that's what you have to do. So that I wanted to, I guess, say it that way because you just make sure you're not trying to make an excuse for yourself. Just acknowledge that you're not trying to just get around something you shouldn't be getting around. Just leave it alone. And again,
Yeah.
it just depends on the person. Um, I wanted to before I forgot to talk about the go back just real quick the harm reduction. So I know it sounds like there's like two different kinds of harm reduction, and we just finished talking about with the use of Suboxone, but I know I just want to also mention the other type of harm reduction where, you know, it involves the addict still using, but we provide them things to use safely. And that's another controversial one because it's like, well, you're still allowing them, such as
Oh,
like,
the user sites. Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Um, I know that was when I was in California. That was when we were talking about harm reduction, that was another way we were talking about it. So there are people that I know, and I wonder where she's at, but I know she just said, I am not going to stop using heroin. You can say whatever you want to say to me, it's just not stopping.
Yeah.
Like, okay, sweetie, at least come here and let's give you some clean needles so you're not sharing. People have an issue with that, and I understand because it's just like, well, I think the idea is you got to keep working at them, keep working at it, and some people are just like, no, just no, I'm not doing it. So I just wanted to speak to that, also that aspect of harm reduction, that there are just some people who just, that's another kind of harm reduction that is out there. It's a different one Because again, it just sounds like we're giving up and we're just saying, well, here, just do this, use this, just do it clean. Just, that's, yeah. I just want to say that.
Well, and I thank you for bringing that up, because I have even heard on the flip side, addicts start to blame their enablers or safe shooter sites for their addiction. And that comes back to the being very honest with ourselves. Because again, like that form of harm reduction, the reason I brought it up was, like I mentioned, that I feel like people who do not come from addiction or that world don't realize that it's not harm reduction for the addict. It does stop cross contamination, and it provides them healthy tools and stuff. There's a lot of medical safety nets, but it's not to make them stop using. It's to make them not be dangerous to the community anymore and to themselves anymore. And that is the honest truth about it. And if we want to do something about that being a problem, then we need to start implementing alternative and very serious social safety nets and accept that addiction is a very serious problem in this country. And we need to start shifting funding to do something about it. Or this is the alternative. We can make the community as safe as possible by kind of putting them in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
And it also goes to, I mean, you're driving down the city, you see people using mud puddle water to shoot up, and do you want your children around that? Do you want these addicts to go into a building where they're unseen and supervised and made sure they're not overdosing and being taken care of? Or do you want them in the streets dying in front of your children? And, so you got to give and take with it. Yeah, you don't like it, but would you rather have this? They're going to do it anyway. So would you rather have them out of sight, from your children and society, I guess? And speaking on, you just said about realizing it and us changing as a nation and stuff. What sort of things can we do as individuals to combat addiction for our country? And what should we as a country be doing as a whole? I mean, I know getting out in the open and actually being able to communicate about it and not hiding the situation anymore is going to be a big help.
I think that's a big part of it, but I think, and it's saying it out loud it might sound cliche maybe, but the reality is with all the things that come with loving an addict, which includes very sad things like locking your doors and hiding your money and not enabling and knowing when, going to the gas station with them to put gas in their car to get to work because you can't trust handing them $50. And nowadays it's laced with everything. So it might be the last $50 they need to never come back again. And that would be a horrible, it's such a strenuous role to love an addict. The reality is we need to be able to, when I work with addicts now, I have to stop and remind myself not to carry anger toward their addiction at them. You are going to have to set kind of unreasonable boundaries. But we have to not forget empathy. Screaming at people, calling them junkies, telling them they'll never get better. I know it's what you want to do because you're frustrated and hurt and scared. But these kind of forms of communication really kind of just hammer home what most addicts carry around in themselves, which is, I don't know how it got this bad. I don't think I can get better. I should probably just let go. And then we spend a bunch of time really mad because we woke up the next day. And so the way my mom said it was, an addict at its worst practices suicide as a hobby. We're not outwardly suicidal, but we do tend to do wildly dangerous things. And the self-loathing that comes with that and the frustration with not being able to stop the impulse is incredibly dangerous. So if you know someone who's an addict, or if you are trying to figure out how to make this situation better, reminding them that I can't give you $20, but I love you so much and you can get better. And I know that sounds redundant and I know it sounds frustrating, but it starts there. It starts at the very baseline. And then we can start building communities built around that kind of mentality. But first we have to stop being angry at it, like it's someone's fault. You can blame the pharmaceutical companies, blame the allergy, blame the environment. It doesn't matter. It's here. It's huge. We've got to do something about it.
Like Kareem and I were saying last episode, having patience with the addict too. Understanding that maybe they want to get better and they can't, but they're trying. having patience and understanding that, you know, maybe they are working towards it, but you are going to have to deal with the things, like you said, locking your doors. And it made me giggle a little bit about the going to the gas station with them. Oh, I need money for gas, Mom. I need money for gas. And her just telling me no, but I love you. And that really happened. You know, I'm like, Mom, I need $20. I need to get to, you know, go see my kid. And she's like, Kyle, I can't send you any more money, but I love you. I'm sorry. I'm like, come on up. She's like, can't, Kyle, I love you. Bye. I love you. And she just hung up. And that was strong of her to do. And looking back, I was pissed and I was upset at her. Fuck her, you know, bitch.
I'm sure we're real mad.
Yeah, I was mad because I couldn't get my fix. But looking back now, I appreciate it. And that must have been so fucking hard for her to be like, no, Kyle, I love you. Bye. I got to go. Bye. And just ending it. You know, she knew what she had to do. She set those boundaries. And yeah, it's hard.
I think that we in America have an issue with dealing with the problem or the elephant in the room, and it's so easier to point fingers. So we say it's the pharmaceutical company or it's this. Yeah, it might have started. It could be, they could be contributing to it, but now it's way bigger now. Now we have a problem. So how do we deal with it? Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't stop synthesizing opiates because people need reduction in pain. We can't stop certain things. I mean, there may be some, we could probably increase the education with certain doctors and educate them on when to, on monitoring the prescribing of benzos and opiates. You know, there could be more education in medical school about that. But it's here. So now we have to really deal with it. And I think it starts with what you guys said. Those things, the boundaries. So teaching now, since it's everywhere, let's now teach everybody who's on the ground dealing with it to tell their loved ones that may come, who's the addict, may come for, you know, the money, no, or whatever type of boundaries, you know, like you said, Katt, you know, there's some certain boundaries that may not be conventional or whatnot, but you have to set up because now it's on the ground, it's there. We can't try to blame the big companies, it's here. I think equipping everybody with how to deal with it instead of trying to point fingers and distract and providing more resources, you know, to the issue, because I still don't think that there's any real, I mean, I hear it being talked about on a political level, but not really nothing real is to me.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. You know?
Waiting too.
It's here.
Yeah.
It's
so
here. However it happened, it's here and we gotta deal with it.
Yeah. So I just feel like at some point, like I hate when people say this, we need to have a conversation. Like how often, how much longer do we have to have a conversation when we actually see everything that's happening? Like we can talk our brains out, gotta do something. So I think that it's just really, to me, one, educating people and helping people who helping them to understand what this looks like, so that way they don't internalize frustration and anger and lash out, but they understand, you know, and they take steps like Kyle's mom say, you know, I love you, but I can't, you know, just equipping people with those so that they feel okay. I'm not a parent yet, so I can't know what it's like to turn down your child when they're asking for help and what that may feel like at the moment. I think instinctually you want to be supportive, but and then that's hard. That's hard. So I think really helping people understand that it's okay to say no. It's okay to do this, and empowering people. I think that would overall help, and maybe that would be the start to help control that. And then, you know, we just keep building from there. I don't want to try to make it seem like I have the answer, but that would start. It would start from there, build from there, just equipping people.
So now,
to piggyback off of Kareem, that's exact. There are creative ways to say no to your family. You can even, when these family members show up who are surely going to ask for money or whatever, you can get creative and start being like, I can give you a ride to a meeting, or I won't put gas in your car until you come with me to a meeting. You can start to plant seeds and push. And I promise you, they will either distance themselves, because that's what addicts do. If they're not getting what they need, but they also don't have justification to be your victim, then they just draw themselves. We do it really well. So you just kind of shoehorn little, I'll take you to a meeting and then I'll put gas in your car.
Mhm.
Ways.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
now, being an addict, addict in recovery, is that what steered your decision to go into this path? Just, I guess my question is, what steered your career choice to make you want to be in the recovery field?
This is actually really funny. This could segue really easily into the topic that we might end.
That's where we're
Yeah.
going next. Oh, perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Because so I had started to plateau in my recovery, and this is something I would tell everyone to like keep an eye out for. The thing that has kept me alive so far is a sense of growth, of things getting better and then getting things from that. I would, better at my job. I was a better worker. Little things started to pile up. At a certain point, I was getting bored. And I was like, is this it? The dead end job in the very small town, third shift, kind of barely hanging on. And my sponsor said, well, no, you owe time back to who saved your life. You need to go back home. And my mom said the same thing. She was like, you need to go tell your story at the rehab where you recovered from. But when I went to go tell my story, the women's unit had been removed and it was just a men's unit. So when I went to work or when I went to speak there, they were hiring. I filled out an application and that's how I started. The idea of working in recovery, which I very much approached with like, I'm going to get turned down. I don't have an education. They're going to find out I'm not smart enough or don't have a strong enough recovery, or my recovery doesn't cookie cutter fit everyone else's. And they said, no, we take high school equivalent or experience based, which means if you are an addict in recovery and have a certain set amount of years, you can work in this facility as a recovery advocate. So it was kind of, I stumbled into it more or less trying to go back and do the right thing. I was told by my sponsor, go back and do the right thing. You got to complete your steps and go tell your story. And now I get to tell pieces of my story every day to all kinds of addicts.
That's awesome. That's definitely huge. Having that awakening and realizing that you do have a debt to pay. And when I was in treatment, the addict in the whole story, I keep mentioning it and I keep trying to, I guess, push it on people because it meant so much to me. I am an addict. I'm in a hole. I'm trapped. I have no way out. And then here comes another addict. And he jumps down with you, and I'm like, oh, great. What are you doing here? I have no way out. I've been here before. And that was huge. And I wanted to be that addict to jump down in the hole. And I do have a debt to pay. And I was only one life that was saved, but if we could save as many lives as we can, those addicts are going to go on to share their thoughts and their recovery with other people. And hopefully it'll catch just like addiction did. And it'll just keep growing and growing. And our recovery community is going to get bigger and bigger. And we're only going to get stronger from here,
Absolutely. It was one of the, I didn't really realize in the beginning of recovery what people meant by acts of service. And if you go into the room, it starts as like making coffee or saying hi to, as you get a month in or so, someone will like maybe give you the keys to a church and you get to unlock the door for the meeting. And I didn't really understand the purpose of it until my service calling happened. And sometimes you find it in the rooms and sometimes you kind of stumble your way into it. But I believe every recovered addict, if they are on the right path, will kind of stumble their way into these ways to give back. And it's starfish in the sea. That was the story that gave me hope, was the starfish in the sea. And there's a little boy tossing starfish into the ocean. And someone walks up to him and says, why are you doing that? They just get washed up again. You're not going to be able to save all of them. It'll never work. And he tosses the starfish into the ocean. And he said, it mattered to that one. And he keeps walking.
I like that one.
I truly believe that's what it is.
I like that one a lot. That's right up there with the addict in the whole story for me. I like it. On this episode, we got a topic we're going to jump into now. Katt has been kindly enough to provide us with a topic to talk about. So, Katt, if you want to jump into your topic and explain a little bit about what we're going to be talking about.
I will. I don't know I don't think I have a hard copy of them, but I think in NA and AA, there's a reading that we do on occasion called the promises. And the reason I appreciate the promises is because the steps and the writings in the rooms are so specific for almost secret reasons until you move through recovery. And I think it's fascinating because I like birds and talking, if you haven't noticed it. And I'm gonna pull them right now. I think it will probably take seconds. Here it is. Okay. I'm gonna read some of them so we can talk about them because I think they're really important, and I think people kind of read through them really quickly because we're usually sick of the meeting by then. We're all ready to go. We all got places to be. So the promises are, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us, and we will suddenly realize that our higher power is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And then there's something called a call and response, where are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. The reason right now in my recovery, the promises are precious to me, because if you are painstaking, like Kareem mentioned earlier, when we were talking about whether or not maintenance or even marijuana was something, if you are painstakingly honest with yourself about your addiction and what you're doing and why you're doing it, that is the only way it works. That's why it mentions in the readings that there are those who cannot or will not be honest with themselves. There is kind of a really specific place you have to be mentally in your addiction, in your active addiction, in order for recovery to kind of take hold. I was real desperate and afraid at the end of the road for me. And I had lost entire control of myself as a person. It was not a place I like to go back to mentally if I can help it. But it was important because I was willing to do anything to stop it. And I didn't like any of what I did in the beginning. It all made me very angry. But if we are painstaking, there is change that happens, because the inevitable thing that happens when you change your behaviors is change. And it sounds so simple, but it is such a complicated beginning phase of recovery.
Absolutely.
I just resonate with part of just being honest with where you are, where you are in your strengths and weaknesses, where you are in your recovery, being true to it. Being really true to it. It's hard. And I think when you do that inventory, it's really hard because you have to confront some things, and that's not easy. That's not easy, I think, for anybody. But it's something that has to be done. Confront those things. That's what I resonate. I yeah, that part of it really resonates. The honesty with yourself.
Yeah, being honest, and like that's what we keep drilling into people. I always used to hide. Being an addict, we'd hide, we'd lose in isolation. And then even when I came out of recovery, and I was looking so good in the mirror, and I was feeling good about myself. I had my psoriasis cream for my face, and I was really excited, and I wanted to share that with people. But then I also had that feeling of, I'm going to get judged. Oh, he was an addict. He was using. All those stories were true, and I just said, screw it. I don't care anymore. If our stories can benefit other addicts, then I'm gonna share it. I'm gonna put myself in an uncomfortable position. I got to be honest with myself and open about it before I can help other people. Or else, if I don't work through my problems and if I'm not open with myself and my own recovery, there's no way I can help others in theirs.
Mhm.
So definitely, I really appreciate that reading. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it is absolutely one of the most difficult. I think people underestimate it in the beginning. I underestimated it in the beginning of my recovery, how, they use the word painstaking for a reason, because there is shame and guilt and frustration and all the things we talked about before. So to ask someone to hold a mirror up to themselves like that, when we have become such experts at avoiding that mirror at all costs,
Yeah.
there's a rather devastating sense of self kind of fracture that happens. And I think it really happens for anyone when you confront a time in your life when you have to check in with yourself and you realize that you are colliding directly with what deep down in yourself to be who you want to be or who you expect yourself to be, our own expectations. It's difficult and it can be lonely, but the next thing is we'll know a new serenity and a new peace. And I think that part's very true too. When you, like our host was saying, when you get to a point where you're just like, no, this is what I have and this is on the table. And I owe taxes to the state and they threaten to arrest me pretty regularly. And I have to do these things because I negated responsibility and hid in my addiction. And these are things I tell people not only to kind of combat that shame, but so other people understand.
I want to ask this question, and I hope I'm asking this the right way. So I wanted to ask both you and Kyle, now from a gender perspective, and Kat as a woman, what does that look like for you to finally get to that point where you can look at yourself? Because I feel like, with men as well, especially when it comes to shame, there's a thing with men that they have to look strong and all that stuff and all these different things in society. There are certain things that we don't want to confront. So I'm wondering, as a woman, how did you get to that place where you were able to do that? And the same with you, Kyle. 'Cause I feel like there are people out there who are at these little points and maybe they want to know, how did she do it? How did he do it? What does that look like? So if that question makes sense to either of you, to really just hold the mirror up and finally just be like, yeah, this is there and I need to deal with it. I need to be honest about it.
But
Oh, I'm gonna make lots of people angry. I was enraged when as a woman, the concept that settled in for me, and I want to be really careful with how I say this, because if someone has hurt you or done something against you, that is a reflection on them as a human being, and no one deserves to be hurt, or no one's personal space deserves to be violated. But here's the thing. I learned about something called learned helplessness, where in your environment, particularly, there was a horrible scientist who used animal cruelty, but he did an experiment where he took a dog and he tied it up. I'm sorry for people who love dogs, the dog lives, but he tied it up on an electric pad and would electrocute it. And the dog, of course, fought up to a point, and then it stopped fighting. And he untied the dog and he opened the gate and electrocuted the dog, and the dog just laid there and cried because it had just accepted that as its lifestyle now. It had stopped trying to go different places, to different people, to learn different things. It had just accepted this horrible, painful scenario. And something clicked in my brain where I realized that I had accepted that I didn't deserve better.
Mm.
Something very serious needed to change, or I was going to keep getting worse. Then fear and anger ensued very shortly afterward, and I spent a month or so in rehab, very mad that I wasn't legally an insane person, because that would have negated me from personal responsibility. And so that was my that was my breaking point.
yeah, that that dog analogy really resonates, because I've been in that position where I'm like, you know what, I've tried to change. I can't change. Nothing's working. I'm an addict. I'm gonna die an addict. Screw it. I don't care. I know. And I see all those older people that are still using, and I'm like, I'm gonna be one of them. Whatever. I just accepted the fact, and I didn't even try to, leave the cage anymore. So definitely. But as for me, the point where I realized I had to be open, and I stopped caring about others' thought about me. My persona was always a tough guy. I'm gonna be a tough guy, blah blah. And I was always careful how I portrayed myself around. But actually allowing myself to feel, and show my emotions and tell people, yeah, I'm human. I'm hurting too.
Yeah, as a woman, I would say take inventory on where your pain is coming from and know that the full spectrum is there and you are allowed to set new boundaries and learn new things and be around different people. We are not subscribed to what we learned when we were young. You can change that. We have power to change that if we try, but we have to try first.
I wanted to ask one more. I think I probably have one more question, given that, one of the things that, I do want to say is that we want to take an opportunity to, represent everybody, who we have on. So given that we have this opportunity from a woman's perspective, my last question is, for a lot of the women, young girls, and even older, all age groups and how everybody identifies, somebody is struggling. What would you tell, women, in terms of how to move forward if they're scared or don't know which way to turn, who to talk to, if anybody will understand their struggle, hear their voice, what would you say to someone who's just asking that question, how, where can I go? What do I do? Or I'm not strong enough.
For me, my experience as a young girl was a lot of being told. Everyone liked me so much when my dad had passed away or the family was in turmoil. Everyone liked me when I was empathetic and smiling and caring. And when I had tantrums, when I didn't know how to process the full spectrum of emotions that all human beings can access, no one wanted to deal with me. And so I started to internalize that. And so to other young women, I would say that you are entitled to your full spectrum of emotions. Mm-hmm. And when someone hurts you, it's okay to say they hurt you. And we don't have to hold and internalize and punish ourselves. It's not God. It's not that we deserve it. It is okay to say that hurt and I'm done with you now. And I think we're taught very much that we are caretakers and we are supposed to be able to endure and to manage we can do it all with a smile on our face. And life is messy and we make mistakes and we all cry and we all get mad and we should all be allowed to do those things. And so if you're alone, I would suggest go find a place. For me, it was meetings or rehab where I was allowed to say, man, I am so pissed off and no one is listening to me. And for someone else to say back, that would piss me off too.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I guess before we start wrapping this episode up, what's some advice you could leave our viewers that are struggling with their addiction? What's your final thoughts on how they should be going about seeking treatment, realizing the first steps, and realizing they have a problem? I guess leaving them with some inspirational thoughts before we wrap this up.
Well, I would say if you want to stop doing drugs, then don't do drugs. And that should be so. I'm sorry, that was a terrible joke.
We just done the last episode too.
Oh man, I should have listened to episode 3. Listen to 1. Damn it. So my genuine advice would be we take away validation from ourselves as addicts. And as long as you are trying, genuinely trying, you know, in a recovery setting, that is good enough. The only requirement is a desire to stop. And know that as long as you're still trying, your friends and family may not have a lot of patience for you left, but someone in the recovery community is willing to drag you out if you are brave enough to just go find them.
Someone's willing to throw you back in the ocean.
Absolutely. Someone.
And I want to say a little bit off that. I think I probably said it before. It's easier as well to go into a new space. People don't know you because they're not going to judge you by your past. Your family, people who are close to you, they may be rightfully angry or whatnot, and they may not hear when you say, "I want to get help. I want to do this." But I think that you will have more open ears, in meetings or treatment, for people to hear your voice and say, I really want to stop. I've been struggling. I don't know what to do. I want to find a tool. So, just know that there should never be any judgment. Should never be any judgment in meetings. There should never be there should not be judgments in treatment.
So hard agree.
Huh?
Hard agree.
Yeah.
Hard
So
agree.
you should never. So if you're fearful, I feel like you can call a treatment center to ask. You should be able to ask 1,001 questions. Or even if you're still using, don't think that to go into a meeting you have to be drug free. That's the space. That's the space probably for you to go in and you may not be comfortable speaking, but go enough times and you might be able to ask somebody. You might hear somebody's story and struggle, and then you might be able to ask them if you resonate with somebody's story. Like, how do I do this? Really, just I don't know. So yeah, just like she said, go to meetings or treatment. Someone will hear you. They're there to hear you.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna start wrapping this episode up. So I just want to thank you again, Katt, for coming on. I know you said a lot of inspirational things, and hopefully someone out there listening can resonate with what you said and help them in their journey and help them seek recovery, because that's what we're here to do.
And this was amazing. It's a huge opportunity to be able to speak. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So remember, everybody, to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And remember, it works if you work it. So work it, you're worth it. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming, listening.
If you would like to support New Beginnings by ordering a t-shirt, you can do so by emailing us at newbeginning113023@gmail.com. They are $25 a piece, and all proceeds go to benefit New Beginnings Narcotics Anonymous meeting on Sunday nights, which are held via Zoom. And you can find the link on our Facebook page, New Beginnings. New Beginnings also has a group page. Please look for us on Facebook and add us. Your support is very important to us. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and always share.